I didn't like Evan from the moment he opened his mouth. It wasn't anything dramatic either. No big argument, no instant rivalry. Just the way he talked. Like everything was slightly inconvenient to him, including me. Like he had better things to do than be there, but somehow still chose to stay just long enough to get under my skin. We met on a random Monday morning at work. New guy. Transfer from another branch. I remember walking into the break room, half awake, craving coffee, and there he was, leaning against the counter like he owned the place. "Machine's broken," he said without even looking at me. No. Hey. No introduction. Just that. I frowned, stepping closer. "It worked Friday." "Yeah." He shrugged, finally glancing over. "And now it doesn't." Something about the way his eyes lingered for half a second too long made my chest tighten, but I ignored it. Focused instead on the annoyance. "Did you try turning it on?" I shot back. He smirked. Actually smirked. "Wow. Genius." "No, Walter, I just stood here staring at it for fun." That was the first time he said my name. I hadn't told him yet. I paused. "How do you know my name?" "Your mug." He nodded toward the sink. I followed his gaze. "Right. My stupid mug with Walter printed across it in bold letters. A gift from a friend I now slightly resented." "Creepy," I muttered. "Observant," he corrected. God, he was irritating. And yet, I didn't leave. I stayed there, messing with the coffee machine longer than necessary, fully aware he hadn't moved either. We stood shoulder to shoulder in that cramped space, neither of us speaking, but the silence didn't feel normal. It felt charged. Like something was quietly building under the surface. I hated that I noticed it. Eventually, I gave up. "I'll just get coffee downstairs." "Smartest thing you've said so far," he replied. I rolled my eyes and walked out. That should have been the end of it. Except it wasn't. Because Evan had this way of showing up. Not everywhere, not constantly, but just enough. Just often enough to make me aware of him. In meetings, he'd sit across from me, leaning back in his chair like he didn't care, but every now and then I'd catch him watching me. Not obvious. Just quick glances. Like he was studying me. At lunch, he'd somehow end up at the same table, even if there were plenty of others free. And every interaction? The same. Short. Dry. Slightly sarcastic. "You always this quiet?" he asked me once, out of nowhere. "Only around annoying people." "Must be exhausting for you then," he said, not missing a beat. I clenched my jaw. "Why?" "Because I'm around a lot." That stupid smirk again. I should have walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, staring at him longer than I meant to, noticing things I didn't want to notice. The way his hair fell slightly into his eyes when he leaned forward. The way his voice dropped just a little when he wasn't being sarcastic, which was rare, but it happened. And those moments? They threw me off more than anything. Because suddenly he wasn't irritating. He was something else. It got worse the third week. We were assigned to the same project. Of course we were. I found out when my manager casually mentioned it like it was no big deal. Like pairing me with the one person who got under my skin the most was completely normal. "Evan's good," she said. "You'll balance each other out." Balance. Right. The first time we sat down to actually work together, it started exactly how I expected. "You're doing that wrong," he said, barely 5 minutes in. I didn't even look up. "I'm not." "You are." "I'm not." Silence. Then, "You're stubborn." That made me glance at him. "You're insufferable." He held my gaze for a second, something unreadable flickering in his expression. Then, quieter this time. "Yeah. I get that a lot." And just like that, the tension shifted. It wasn't gone. But it changed. I didn't respond. Just looked back at my screen, trying to ignore the weird feeling settling in my chest. That brief moment where he didn't sound like a jerk. Where he sounded real. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did. From then on, working together became this strange mix of frustration and something else I didn't want to name. We argued. A lot. Over small things. Big things. Things that didn't even matter. But in between, there were moments. Like when he'd lean over my shoulder to point something out, his arm brushing mine just slightly. Too close. Always too close. Or when he'd laugh, rare but real, and it caught me off guard every time. And the worst part? I started thinking about him. Not just at work. At home. Lying in bed, replaying conversations, arguments, the way he looked at me sometimes like he was trying to figure something out. It made no sense. I didn't even like him. He irritated me. Constantly. But somehow, I couldn't stop thinking about him. And I had a feeling. He knew it. The worst part wasn't that Evan irritated me. It was that he seemed completely aware of it, and enjoyed it. Are you always this tense, or is it just when you're around me? He asked one afternoon, not even looking up from his laptop. I didn't hesitate. Just you. Good, he said, way too casually. I'd hate to think I wasn't special. I scoffed, shaking my head, but I could feel it, that familiar tightness in my chest. That mix of annoyance and something I refused to acknowledge. We were sitting too close again. Small meeting room, one table, two chairs. There were bigger spaces available, but no, he had picked this one. Of course he had. Can you move? I muttered, nudging his arm slightly. No. I turned to him. No? No, he repeated, finally looking at me. You can move. I stared at him for a second, waiting for the joke. There wasn't one. You're unbelievable, I said. And yet, he leaned back slightly, stretching his arm along the back of my chair, too casual, too close. You keep sitting next to me. My breath caught for half a second. I hated that he noticed things like that. I don't, I said quickly. You do. I don't. He tilted his head, studying me again, that same quiet intensity slipping in beneath the sarcasm. Then why didn't you pick a different seat? I opened my mouth. Closed it. Because I didn't have an answer that didn't sound stupid. He smiled. Not the usual smirk. Something softer. Like he'd just proven a point without needing to push further. Exactly, he said quietly. God, I hated him. At least that's what I kept telling myself. But it was getting harder to believe. Because the truth was, I was starting to notice things I couldn't ignore anymore. Like how he wasn't like that with other people. With everyone else, Evan was normal. Still a little reserved, sure, but polite. Easygoing, even. He laughed more. Smiled more. With me? It was different. Sharper. More focused. Like every word, every glance, every small moment was deliberate. And I didn't know what to do with that. One evening, we ended up staying late to finish part of the project. The office had emptied out hours ago, leaving just the two of us and the low hum of fluorescent lights. I was exhausted, rubbing my eyes as I stared at my screen. You're gonna mess it up if you keep working like that, Evan said. I sighed. I'm fine. You're not. I said I'm fine. There was a pause. Then, quieter. Walter. Something about the way he said my name made me look up. He was already watching me. Not in that teasing way. Something else. Take a break, he said. I held his gaze for a second longer than necessary, then leaned back in my chair. 5 minutes, I muttered. 10. 5. He exhaled softly, almost amused. You're impossible. Takes one to know one. That earned a small laugh. Real this time. I felt it again, that shift. That weird, subtle change in the air when we weren't arguing. It made everything feel closer. Too close. I stood up abruptly. I'm getting water. He hummed, leaning back in his chair. Don't take too long. I might miss you. I rolled my eyes, grabbing my bottle and heading out. But the second I was alone in the hallway, I stopped. Because my heart was beating too fast. And I didn't like why. I stayed there longer than I needed to, staring at nothing, trying to get a grip. This was ridiculous. He was just a guy. An annoying, sarcastic, way too observant guy who happened to get under my skin. That was it. So why did it feel like more? Why did every little comment stick in my head? Why did I replay the way he said my name like it meant something? I shook it off, pushing myself to go back. When I walked into the room again, Evan hadn't moved much, but his eyes immediately flicked up to me. "There you are," he said. It was such a simple sentence. But something about it felt different, like he'd actually been waiting. I sat down without responding, focusing on my screen again. For a few minutes neither of us spoke. "You're thinking too much." I froze slightly. "What?" "You do that," he said. "Get quiet. Start overanalyzing everything." I frowned, glancing at him. "You don't know what I'm thinking." "Don't I?" There it was again. That look. Like he saw more than he should. "You don't," I said firmly. He held my gaze for a second, then shrugged. "Okay." But he didn't look convinced. And for some reason, that bothered me more than if he'd argued back. We finished the work not long after that, packing up in silence. As we walked out of the building together, the night air hit cool against my skin. I should have just said goodbye. Gone home. Ended it there. But instead, "You do that on purpose, don't you?" I said suddenly. Evan stopped, turning to me. "Do what?" "This." I gestured vaguely between us. "The whole thing." He watched me carefully. "You're gonna have to be more specific, Walter." I hesitated. Then, quieter, "You push me." A pause. Then, "Yeah." No denial. No confusion. Just that. I blinked. "Why?" For once, he didn't answer right away. He stepped a little closer, not enough to be obvious, but enough that I noticed. Everything in me went still. "Because you react?" he said finally. "That's a stupid reason." "Is it?" "Yes." Another pause. Then, softer this time. "I like seeing you react." My chest tightened. "That doesn't make sense." He shrugged slightly, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "It doesn't have to." And just like that, I had no idea what to say. Because for the first time, Evan wasn't irritating. He was confusing. And somehow, even harder to ignore. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. Not that we'd ever really had a normal. But whatever weird balance we had before, it shifted. And I felt it immediately. Evan didn't stop being irritating. If anything, he got worse, but in a quieter way. Less obvious. More intentional. Like he didn't need to try as hard anymore. It started with small things. Glances that lasted a second too long. Standing just a little too close when we worked. Saying my name more often than necessary, like he knew exactly what it did to me now. "Walter!" I looked up from my screen. "What?" He didn't say anything right away. Just leaned against the edge of my desk, arms crossed, watching me. "What?" I repeated, more impatient this time. He shrugged slightly. "Nothing." I frowned. "Then why'd you say my name?" A small pause. Then, almost casually, "Wanted your attention." My stomach tightened. "You already had it," I said. "I know." And somehow, that was worse. I looked away first, focusing back on my screen even though I hadn't processed a single word in the last 30 seconds. This was getting out of hand. I needed space. That became very clear a few days later. We were in the elevator, just the two of us. It had stopped on every single floor before finally heading down, and by the time it did, the silence between us felt heavy. Too noticeable. Too close. I could feel him beside me without even looking. "Why are you avoiding me?" he asked suddenly. I stiffened. "I'm not." "You are." "I'm not." I repeated, sharper this time. He turned slightly toward me. I could feel it more than see it. You don't sit next to me anymore, he said. You leave early. You barely talk unless you have to. I kept my eyes forward. Maybe I just got tired of arguing with you. A quiet beat. Then softer. That's not it. I clenched my jaw. You don't get to decide that. Then tell me what it is. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. I stepped out immediately. It's nothing. Walter. I kept walking. I didn't stop until I was outside, the cool air hitting my face harder than I expected. My chest felt tight again. And I knew exactly why. Because he wasn't wrong. I was avoiding him. Not because I was tired of him. But because I wasn't. And that was the problem. I tried to keep my distance after that. For a couple days it worked. Minimal interaction. Strictly professional. No unnecessary conversations. It should have made things easier. It didn't. If anything, it made everything worse. Because now I was aware of him in a different way. Every time he walked into a room, I noticed. Every time he laughed with someone else, something in my chest twisted in a way I didn't want to examine. And the worst part? He noticed that too. Of course he did. By Friday, he'd had enough. I was grabbing my bag, ready to leave early, again, when his voice stopped me. We need to talk. I didn't turn around. About what? Don't do that. Do what? This, he said, stepping closer. Act like nothing's going on. I exhaled slowly, turning to face him. Nothing is going on. He looked at me like he didn't believe a word of it. Then look at me and say that again. I held his gaze. Nothing is going on. A pause. Then he stepped closer. Too close. My breath caught, but I didn't move. Liar, he said quietly. Something in my chest snapped. Why do you care? I shot back. Seriously, Evan, what is this to you? You like messing with me, fine, whatever. You got your reaction. Congrats. That's not what this is. Then what is it? He didn't answer right away. And for the first time since I'd met him, Evan looked unsure. That threw me off more than anything. I don't know, he admitted finally. I blinked. You don't know? No, he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I just... He stopped, exhaling sharply. You're different with me, he continued. And I don't get why. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You're the one who started this. Yeah, he said. I know. But it's not just me anymore. That hit harder than I expected. I looked away first this time, shaking my head slightly. You're overthinking it. Am I? Yes. Then why are you acting like this? I didn't have an answer. At least not one I was ready to say out loud. So I did what I'd been doing all week. I shut it down. It doesn't matter, I said. We work together. That's it. Something in his expression shifted. Not irritation. Not teasing. Something else. Right, he said. And just like that, the tension didn't disappear. It just changed again. But this time, it didn't feel like something building. It felt like something about to break. Things between me and Evan didn't explode right away. It would have been easier if they did. A fight. A clear breaking point. Something I could point to and say that's when everything went wrong. But no. Instead, it got quiet. Not normal quiet. That heavy kind. The kind where every word feels like it matters more than it should. We still worked together. Still sat in the same meetings. Still passed each other in the hallway. But the edge was different now. Less teasing. More distance. And somehow, that was worse. Because I missed it. I noticed it one afternoon when I said something sarcastic, just out of habit. Wow, took you long enough, I muttered as he finally sent over a file we'd been waiting on. Before, he would have fired something right back. Instead, he just said, Yeah, Sorry. No smirk. No attitude. Just neutral. I frowned at my screen, waiting for the follow-up that never came. That unsettled me more than any argument we'd ever had. By the end of the day, I was already irritated. Not at him. At myself. Which made no sense. I told myself this was what I wanted. Space. Simplicity. No more weird tension. So why did it feel like something was missing? It kept building over the next few days. Little things. Like how he stopped saying my name unless he had to. How he didn't sit near me anymore. How he didn't look at me the same way. And yeah, maybe I noticed that a little too much. Maybe I paid attention when I shouldn't have. But it was hard not to. Especially when I saw him with other people. Laughing. Relaxed. Easy. The way he used to be with me, before everything got complicated. That was the part one didn't expect. The jealousy. I didn't even realize what it was at first. Just this sharp, uncomfortable feeling in my chest every time I saw him talking to someone else like that. Like I'd lost something I never actually had. It pissed me off. Enough that by Thursday I snapped. We were alone again, same meeting room as before. Same table. Same seats. Except this time, there was space between us. Too much space. You're being weird, I said suddenly. Evan didn't even look up. Am I? Yeah. Okay. That was it. No argument. No reaction. Just okay. I stared at him. That's it. What do you want me to say, Walter? There it was. My name. But it didn't sound the same anymore. And I hated that I noticed. I don't know, I admitted, frustration creeping in. Something. Anything. You've been acting different all week. He finally looked up. Calm. Too calm. You told me to keep it professional, he said. So I am. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I opened my mouth. Paused. Because suddenly, I didn't know how to explain it without sounding ridiculous. I exhaled sharply. This isn't you. A small, almost bitter smile crossed his face. You don't know me that well. That hit harder than it should have. Yeah, I said quietly. Maybe I don't. Silence settled between us. Thick. Uncomfortable. Why does it bother you? I looked up at him. His expression hadn't changed, but his voice had. Lower. More careful. I hesitated. Because it does, I said finally. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. He held my gaze for a long second. Then leaned back slightly in his chair, studying me in that same way he used to, but now it felt different. Less playful. More serious. You liked it before, he said. I frowned. Liked what? The way I was with you. My chest tightened. I never said that. You didn't have to. I shook my head. You're assuming things. Am I? Yes. You're the one who keeps looking at me. That caught me off guard. I don't. You do. He cut in, not harsh, just certain. Every time I'm talking to someone else. Every time I'm not paying attention to you. I went still. Because he wasn't wrong. And he knew it. That doesn't mean anything, I said, even though it sounded weak. Evan leaned forward slightly, closing some of that space between us. Then what does it mean? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because whatever it meant, I wasn't ready to say it out loud. He watched me for a second longer. Then exhaled quietly, leaning back again. Yeah, he muttered. That's what I thought. Something about that, about the way he just accepted it, hit something in me. Sharp. Immediate. Stop doing that, I said. Doing what? Acting like you've got it all figured out. I don't, he said. But I know enough. Clearly not. Then prove me wrong. I clenched my jaw. You're so annoying. A small smile tugged at his lips. There it was. Finally. You liked that before too. And just like that, everything between us snapped back into place. Not calmer, not clearer, but alive again. And somehow, that felt even more dangerous than before. After that, whatever line we'd been dancing around? Yeah, we stopped pretending it wasn't there. Not that we talked about it. We didn't. But it showed up in everything. The looks. The tone. The way neither of us really pulled back anymore. If anything, we leaned into it. Which was a mistake. A big one. Because once it started, it didn't stay small. You're staring again. Evan's voice cut through my thoughts, low and way too close. I blinked, realizing I'd been looking at him longer than I meant to. I'm not, I said automatically. He didn't move. Didn't even pretend to believe me. Walter! That tone again. I looked up. He was standing right next to my chair, close enough that I had to tilt my head slightly to meet his eyes. When you lie, he added quietly, at least try to make it convincing. My jaw tightened. You're full of yourself. Maybe, he shrugged. Or maybe you're just bad at hiding things. I stood up too quickly, my chair scraping against the floor. Or maybe you're imagining things. I shot back. For a second, either of us moved. We were standing way too close now. Closer than before. Close enough that I could actually notice details I'd been trying to ignore for weeks. The faint crease between his brows when he focused. The way his breathing slowed when he was looking at me like this. It wasn't casual anymore. It hadn't been for a while. You know, he said, quieter now. Most people would just admit it. Admit what? That something's going on. My chest tightened. There's nothing going on. He let out a soft breath, like he'd expected that answer. Right. I should have walked away. I knew that. But instead I stayed right there. And what about you? I asked suddenly. That got his attention. What about me? You act like this is all me, I said. Like I'm the only one doing anything. I didn't say that. You don't have to. A pause. Then more direct. You started this. He didn't deny it. Yeah, he said. I did. Why? I'd asked him that before. But this time felt different. Because now we were both fully in it. No pretending. No distractions. Just whatever this was. Evan held my gaze for a long second. Then, because I noticed you. Simple. Too simple. That's it. I frowned. No, he said quietly. But it's where it started. Something about that answer hit deeper than I expected. You noticed me, I repeated. Yeah. Why? You weren't like everyone else. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. That's vague. He huffed a quiet laugh. You want specifics? Yes. Another pause. Then he stepped closer. Just slightly. But enough. You didn't try to impress anyone, he said. You didn't care what people thought. You just did your job and kept to yourself. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't say anything. And, he added, voice dropping just a little, you never looked at me like everyone else does. My chest tightened again. What does that mean? He tilted his head slightly, studying me. Like I'm something you need to like. I frowned. I don't. I know, he cut in. That's the point. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Different from before. Because now there was no sarcasm hiding underneath it. No teasing. Just honesty. And that made everything feel way more real than I was ready for. So what? I said finally, trying to regain some control. You decided to mess with me because of that? A faint smirk returned, but it wasn't the same as before. Partly. I rolled my eyes. Of course. But also, he added, quieter, because I wanted your attention. There it was again. That same line. But this time, it landed differently. You had it, I said. I know. Then why keep pushing? He didn't answer right away. And for a second, I thought he wouldn't answer at all. But then, because I didn't just want your attention. My heart stuttered. I didn't like where this was going. Or maybe I did. Which was worse? What else would you want? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Evan held my gaze. Didn't look away. Didn't hesitate. You. That word hit harder than anything else he'd said so far. Simple. Direct. No sarcasm. No teasing. Just real. My brain short-circuited for a second. That's. I started then stopped. Because I didn't even know what I was going to say. That's what? He asked softly. Complicated. A small breath left him. Yeah, he said. I figured. Silence settled again. But this time, it felt different. Not tense. Not argumentative. Just heavy with everything neither of us knew how to handle. You're annoying, I muttered finally. That earned a quiet laugh. There it is, he said. Shut up. Make me. I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't stop the small smile that slipped through. And he saw it. Of course he did. His expression shifted slightly. Softer. Warmer. And suddenly, this didn't feel like irritation anymore. It felt like something way more dangerous. Because now I knew. And the worst part? I didn't push him away. I stayed. Right there. With him. After he said it. I want you. Things didn't slow down. They got worse. Or better. I still don't know which. Because once something like that is out there, you can't pretend it's not. And we didn't. Not really. We just stopped talking about it directly. Which somehow made everything more intense. It showed up in the way he looked at me now. Not teasing. Not testing. Just certain. Like he'd already decided something, and was waiting for me to catch up. I tried to ignore it. For about a day. Maybe 2. But it didn't work. Because Evan didn't go back to how he was before. He didn't push in the same way. Didn't provoke me just to get a reaction. Instead, he got quieter. Closer, but in a different way. More patient. And that messed with my head way more than the teasing ever did. You're distracted. I glanced up from my screen. I'm working. He hummed, clearly unconvinced. He was sitting across from me this time. Not next to me. Not too close. Just there. Watching. Which somehow felt more intense than when he was right beside me. I added. You've read the same line 3 times. I frowned. No, I haven't. You have. I exhaled sharply, leaning back in my chair. Why do you notice everything? A small shrug. Only when it comes to you. My chest tightened again. God, I hated that. Not the words. The effect they had on me. You don't have to say things like that. I muttered. I know. Then why do you? Because you don't walk away. That hit too close. I didn't respond. Because he was right. Again. And I was starting to hate how often that happened. The rest of the day went by in that same strange tension. Not awkward. Not exactly comfortable either. Just aware. Of him. Of me. Of everything in between. By the time we finished, it was late again. Not as late as last time. But late enough that the office had mostly cleared out. I packed my bag slowly, trying not to think too much. Trying not to feel that pull again. Heading out? He asked. Yeah. He nodded, standing up too. We walked out together. Not planned. Just happened. The hallway was quiet, our footsteps echoing slightly as we moved toward the exit. And for once, neither of us said anything. No teasing. No pushing. Just silence. But it wasn't empty. It felt full. Too full. Like something was sitting right under the surface, waiting. We stepped outside, the cool air hitting us at the same time. I should have said goodbye. Left. Ended it there. But instead. Evan. He turned slightly. Yeah? I hesitated. What happens now? There it was. Finally. Out loud. He didn't answer right away. Just looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time since I'd met him, he didn't seem completely sure. That depends, he said slowly. On what? On you. I frowned. On me? Yeah. That's not helpful. A faint smile touched his lips. It's honest. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. You're unbelievable. I've been told. I shook my head, but I didn't walk away. Didn't move. Neither did he. And suddenly, we were standing there again. Too close. Like always. Except this time, there was no pretending. No distractions. Just the two of us. So what? I said quietly. You're just gonna stand there and wait. If that's what it takes. That's a terrible plan. Maybe, he shrugged. But I don't think you're going anywhere. My chest tightened. Why are you so sure? He held my gaze. Then stepped closer. Slow. Deliberate. Giving me time to move. To step back. To stop this. I didn't. You're still here, he said softly. And that was it. That was the moment everything tipped. Because he was right. I was still there. Even after everything. Even knowing where this was heading. I hadn't walked away. I hadn't stopped it. If anything, I'd been moving toward it this whole time. You're really annoying, I said, but my voice lacked any real bite. A quiet breath of a laugh left him. Yeah, he said. You've mentioned that. Just making sure you don't forget. I won't. Another step closer. Now there was barely any space between us. I could feel it again. That same pull. Stronger now. Clearer. No confusion left. Walter, he said. Just my name. But it felt different this time. He wasn't testing me. Wasn't pushing. He was giving me a choice. And somehow, that made it harder. Because now I couldn't blame him. Couldn't say he started it. If anything happened now, it was on me too. You're waiting, I said quietly. Yeah. For what? His eyes didn't leave mine. For you to decide. My heart was pounding. Too loud. Too fast. But I didn't step back. Didn't look away. Didn't stop it. Because the truth was, I'd already decided. I just hadn't said it yet. And he knew it. Of course he did. He always did. I exhaled slowly. I closed the distance. Not by much. Just enough. But it was enough. And the second I did, everything changed. I don't know who moved first. That's the part that stuck with me afterward. Because one second we were just standing there, too close, too aware, and the next, we weren't just standing there anymore. It wasn't rushed. That's what surprised me. With everything that had been building between us, I expected it to feel explosive, messy, out of control. But it didn't. It felt deliberate. Like we both knew exactly what we were doing. Like we'd been heading here for a while. Evan didn't grab me. Didn't rush it. He just stayed there, close enough that I could feel his breath, his presence, everything about him pulling me in. Still time to walk away, he said quietly. I let out a short breath. You're really still giving me that option? Yeah. Why? A small pause. Because I don't want this to be something you regret. That hit differently. Not teasing. Not cocky. Just real. I shook my head slightly. You're making this harder than it needs to be. A faint smile tugged at his lips. You're the one overthinking it. Shut up. Make me. There it was again. That line. But this time, it landed heavier. Because now I knew exactly what it meant. And for once, I didn't hesitate. I reached for him first. Not dramatic. Not sudden. Just enough. My hand catching the front of his shirt, pulling him that last inch closer. And that was all it took. The space between us disappeared completely. The tension that had been building for weeks finally snapping into something real. His hand came up to my jaw, not rough, not hesitant, just steady, grounding. Like he wanted to make sure I was still there. Still choosing this. And I was. Completely. When he kissed me, it wasn't soft. But it wasn't aggressive either. It felt certain. Like he'd been holding back for way too long, and wasn't going to anymore. And yeah, that hit harder than I expected. Everything else just kind of faded for a second. The irritation. The back and forth. All of it. Gone. Replaced with something a lot simpler. A lot clearer. I didn't think. Didn't overanalyze. For once. I just responded. Pulled him closer. Matched him. And he didn't hold back either. Of course he didn't. That would have been too easy. At some point, I realized my back had hit the wall behind me. Not harsh. Just enough to ground me. To remind me this was actually happening. That this wasn't just another moment we'd replay later. This was real. Evan pulled back slightly, just enough to look at me. And for the first time since I'd met him. He wasn't smirking. Wasn't teasing. He just looked at me. Like he was checking. Making sure. You good? He asked quietly. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Yeah. A small pause. Then, because I couldn't help it. You're still annoying. That made him laugh. Soft. Real. There it is, he said. Don't get used to it. Too late. I rolled my eyes, but I didn't move away. Didn't create distance. Neither did he. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just some one-time thing. Not for him. And definitely not for me. Which meant... Now what? I asked. He tilted his head slightly. You ask that a lot. Because you don't give straight answers. I am giving you one. That's not an answer. A small smirk returned, but softer this time. Less sharp. No, he said. We figure it out. I frowned. That's vague. It's honest. I huffed a quiet breath. You're impossible. And yet, he stepped back just enough to give me space, but not distance. You didn't walk away. There it was again. That same point. The same truth. And this time, I didn't argue. Didn't deflect. I just looked at him. And nodded, just slightly. Yeah, I said. Because at this point, there was no point pretending anymore. I hadn't walked away. Not when he irritated me. Not when he confused me. Not even when things got complicated. And now? After this? I knew I wasn't going to start. Evan watched me for a second longer. Then nodded too. Like that was all he needed. No big speech. No dramatic moment. Just that. And somehow, that felt more real than anything else. Things didn't magically become simple after that. If anything, they got more complicated. But not in the way I expected. I thought it would be awkward. That we'd avoid each other the next day, pretend nothing happened, fall back into something safer. That didn't happen. At all. The next morning, I walked into the office already overthinking everything. Big mistake. Because Evan? He was exactly the same. Not distant. Not weird. Just normal. Morning, he said when I walked past his desk. Like nothing had shifted. Like he hadn't had me pinned against the wall the night before. I stopped. Turned slightly. That's it. He glanced up. What? That's all you're gonna say? A small pause. Then that familiar look, calm, slightly amused, but softer now. What do you want me to say, Walter? I hesitated. Because I didn't actually know. Something different, I guess. Something that acknowledged everything. I don't know, I muttered. Exactly, he said simply. And somehow, that grounded me more than anything else. Because he wasn't pretending it didn't happen. He just wasn't making it bigger than it needed to be. And that made it easier to breathe. The day went on like that. Normal on the surface. But underneath? Not even close. Because now every small thing felt different. When our hands brushed while passing a file, either of us pulled away immediately. When he said my name, it still hit, but now I didn't try to ignore it. And when we looked at each other? There was no confusion left. Just understanding. It wasn't until lunch that things shifted again. I was sitting alone, on purpose this time, trying to get through 5 minutes without overthinking. Didn't work. Because of course. He sat down across from me. You're doing that thing again, he said. I sighed. What thing? Thinking too much. I didn't even argue. Just looked at him. You're way too observant. He shrugged. Only when it matters. You regret it? Straight to the point. Typical. I leaned back slightly, studying him. He didn't look nervous. Didn't look unsure. But he was watching me closely. Waiting. And for once, I didn't dodge it. No, I said. His expression didn't change much. But I saw it, that small shift in his shoulders, like something had just settled. Good, he said quietly. Yeah, I added after a second. You. A faint smirk. If I did, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. Fair. Silence fell again. But it wasn't heavy anymore. It felt steady. Like we weren't figuring things out from scratch. Just adjusting. You're still annoying, by the way, I said after a moment. That got a real smile out of him. I'd be worried if you stopped saying that. Don't worry. Not happening. Good. So what are we doing? I asked. He leaned back slightly, considering it. Not overcomplicating it, he said. That's vague. It's practical. I huffed a quiet breath. You're really bad at labels, aren't you? Yeah. Great. But, he added, leaning forward slightly, his voice lowering just a bit, I know I'm not going back to pretending this is nothing. My chest tightened. Good, I said before I could overthink it. That earned me a look. Not surprised. Just certain. Like he'd expected that answer. Of course he had. You? He asked. I held his gaze. Then nodded. Yeah, I said. Me either. And just like that. It wasn't confusing anymore. Not completely, anyway. We didn't have everything figured out. Didn't have a label. Didn't have some perfect plan. But we had something. Something real. Something that started with irritation. And turned into something I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. And honestly, I was done trying. Because the truth was, he still irritated me. Still pushed me. Still got under my skin in ways no one else did. But now, I understood why. And more importantly, I didn't want it to stop. Not anymore.